Well, Meg, I think it's fair to say last weekend might have been the busiest weekend of the high school sports season so far. We were at football games. We were at volleyball games. You were at volleyball games over in Yakima, and we had soccer mixed in. Have you caught your breath yet from everything that went on this last week?
No.
No, I've not either. I'm just kind of like, all right, what I'm sort of, am I doing a side out on a soccer game, a illegal procedure on a volleyball match? It's all just kind of mixed together in my head.
And sometimes, just like you do one sport at one time in the afternoon, and then you got to shift gears a couple of hours later and do a nightcap of football at Doc Harris.
Yeah, that's how it went for me. I went from covering the Columbia River girls soccer team clinching their 9th consecutive trip to the 2A state semifinals. Congratulations to the Rapids on that accomplishment. To heading over to a football game between Center and Seton Catholic, and you're like, wait a minute, is this week 9 in the Trico again? No, this is the first round of the Class 1A state playoffs. How is it that we had Seton Catholic and Center, two teams so familiar with each other, a budding rivalry in small school football in Southwest Washington, paired together as the 8 and 9 seed in the 1A state playoffs?
Because that's what the 1A seeding committee decided to do. Second time in 3 weeks these two teams have played. My first reaction when the brackets came out on Sunday after week 10 was, honestly, it wasn't really a surprise. And the reason for that, there's a couple of things. Number one, you got to remember, but this is the second year in a row that the Class 1A field, it's only a 12-team bracket. And the reason for that is because there's not enough 1A schools with football teams to have that requirement to be a full 16-team field. So last year they went down to 12. There were a couple schools up north, most notably Bellevue Christian, and some schools out of the Emerald Sound League did not field a football team. And so because of that, they were having to drop down from 16-team tournament down to 12. And the second reason is because Center and Seton Catholic are basically 1 and 1A, them being the 8-9 game, I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I know this isn't a very popular opinion for a lot of people, especially given that the teams played just 2 weeks earlier, but this actually does kind of make sense. And so I kind of saw the writing going into week 10 of, if both of these teams win their week 10 games, this 8-9 matchup is going to be a very high probability, and ultimately it turned into that.
Well, it does track, not only because I think their resumes are pretty much the same, but the fact that for the second straight game in 3 weeks, they basically played the exact same game, a low-scoring game that came down to Seton Catholic making a defensive stand in the final couple of minutes. That's how it went in week 9. That's how it went on Saturday when Center got as close as 1st and goal from the 5 with a chance to tie the game. Ultimately, a couple of untimely penalties and then an interception ended up sealing that deal. But it basically is like, yeah, the seeding tracks, and that for the second game in a row, Seton Catholic ended up being just a little bit better than Center. But to play devil's advocate, if you want to avoid the situation of league rivals facing off in the first round of the state tournament, would it not have made sense to maybe move Center from the 9 seed to the 10 seed and swap them with Life Christian, which would have been a rematch actually of last year's state playoffs when Seton Catholic and Life Christian played a thriller that Seton ended up winning on their road to the making a run to the state championship game. But is that even a consideration in the seating committee's mind that, hey, let's just tweak things a little bit to keep league rivals from facing off?
It is, and that was one of the big reasons why there was this shift in the WIA to create a human element in this when it comes to the matchups, because we had seen previously, even going back to 2008, 2009, when we had teams that were slotted, I guess, depending on where your week 10 matchup is, where you would be slotted across the board for all classifications. But this Trico League matchup wasn't the only one that was a league versus league opponent. Montesano and Tenino was the 12-5 game. That was another 1A Evergreen League matchup. And I know the 1As on social media got a lot of hot topic discussion about what really was, is this the right way to go? And again, I look back to, there's only so many spots that you can put them in, and those Week 10 games, I know they want to limit the travel, but travel's off the board when it comes to Week 11 in the first round of the state playoffs. So I could have seen them move in maybe Le Center to that 10 slot and maybe play a Life Christian, but then you got to look at moving everybody else. You can't just make one move because it's going to be that domino effect. I know that the 2As also got a lot of hot topic discussion. Washougal was actually part of that as well. I think if you're a Panthers fan, you would be wondering, well, how come we got a 15 seed when we were an undefeated league champion? We had an 8-game winning streak going into the first round of the state playoffs. And for me, seeing them get a 15, it honestly was not a shock whatsoever. That's because their win over Fife, I don't think was impressive enough for the committee. And couple that with WF West out of Chehalis pretty much manhandling Columbia River 49 or 45-0. That, I think, made the committee think, maybe the 2A Greater St. Helens isn't very a strong league. And let's face it, to be honest, it hasn't been a strong league for a couple of years now when you look at the league as a whole, top to bottom. So Washougal getting a 15 seed, no surprise. If they had beaten Fife by 3 or 4 touchdowns, like I kind of anticipated they would, they might have slid into that 12-13 spot. Dave Hajek, their head coach, is on the 2A committee, and seeing them get the 15 versus the 2 in Tumwater, not really a big surprise. So I know, again, if you're a Panthers fan and you're wondering why a 15 seed is what they got, that's pretty much a good indication of what.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised by that. I was surprised, it's like, oh, Tumwater, that's kind of that boogeyman that we always joke about you're trying to avoid anytime you enter a tournament setting. But I think you're absolutely right in that the 2A Greater St. Helens League as a whole didn't make a very strong closing argument in Week 10 because of, like you said, Washougal having to dig deep to win a close game against a Fife team whose record on its face wasn't that impressive. And then Columbia River, the final score speaks for itself. A little bit of bad luck in that they lost their starting quarterback pretty early in the game, and that kind of made it so that the Rapids never really had a chance to kind of help carry the banner for the 2A GSHL against WF West. But yeah, you always wonder, it's like, wait a minute, is this a week 10 redo when you see teams from the same district go against each other in state?
Right, and reminder, it's the same committee doing the Week 10 matchups and the round of 16. So again, just a reminder of we have good local representation across all 4 of the classifications. Former Skyview coach Steve Kaiser, even though he is retired from coaching, even though we have seen him on the sidelines this year.
Every game.
Yeah, he is on the committee. 3A is Christian Swain of Evergreen. I mentioned Dave Hajek of Washougal on 2A, and then John Lambert of Le Center is on the 1A committee. When the WIA decided to go to these committees, I think it was something that was very welcoming, and that's something that I applaud the WIA doing under the Mick Hoffman administration, is they're doing things that haven't been done previously, and they're kind of going outside the box, and they're really being a pioneer in a lot of high school state associations when it comes to a number of things, and having that human element is one of them. You look at across the way in Oregon with the OSAA and how it's done, matchups are strictly done just by RPI rankings, and RPI rankings are factored in with the WIA playoffs, but it's not the only thing that matters. I think what's missing, though, is something beyond just active coaches or retired coaches and administrators. I think it would be really good, and yes, we're showing our bias here, is having media representation. We see that in a couple of other sports, most notably soccer. Luke Thompson at the Yakima Herald Republic, outstanding reporter and writer, has been on the boys and girls soccer committee for a number of years now. I was asked to be on the 2A volleyball committee right before COVID hit, and then once that happened, they decided to kind of switch gears and make it just a solely coaches only thing. The drawback to having only coaches is realistically they're only seeing teams mostly from their league. If they go to tournaments, they might see some teams out of area. But for media members such as us, we see kind of a wider range of teams when it comes to our coverage night in and night out. And I think that would be a really good benefit to add, possibly for football. And so that's something that I know for a number of years hasn't happened. It's just been strictly coaches and administrators on the team. But it would be really, really good to see some media members, especially ones that cover high school athletics in Washington, on a statewide statewide level to really get their voice in
I
there.
think we're both thinking about someone like Todd Millis, who
Absolutely.
probably does a better job statewide than any other reporter covering high school sports, someone who really has his finger on the pulse of multiple leagues, multiple classifications, because at the end of the day, coaches, they participate in these polls and whatever, but their focus, make no mistake, is on one team and one team only, their own.
Well, I will play the devil's advocate. I think they do a really good job of putting those blinders on and not advocating for their own teams. I think it speaks volumes to, I remember talking with Steve Kaiser last year. There was talk of could they have a weak quarterfinal home game. There was a really good discussion about Skyview's strength of schedule, and at the time it was the most toughest schedule that Skyview had in his 21 years as head coach, and he was advocating for why, but doing it in a reasonable sense, not just trying to be a homer.
Let me clarify that. I meant just sort of in general as coaches.
Okay,
you get these coaches polls where you're supposed to get input from all across. I think I'm not including the coaches that sit on the seating committees and that, because I think when they agree to do that, they agree to take on a more of a nonpartisan role in that, and so I want to make that clear. I'm not by any means questioning the ability of the coaches on the seating committee to do the job. I'm just looking more at when you open it up to like coaches poll rankings and everything like that.
Sure, and there's a number of factors they use. RPI, Matt Evans over the Tri-Cities. If you don't follow him, please do so at Evans Rankings on any social media site. Having those computer rankings, because they are so gosh darn accurate. It is scary how accurate he is. And he actually was on the committees in football when this initially started. And again, as the years went on, the last couple of years, they have gone away from folks like him and Rylan Spencer, who used to be in charge of Cascade Preps, a statewide high school sports and football website. But that would be a really, really good element to add back in, is having that unbiased statewide representation.
Absolutely, because I think every year it comes up, it's like, did they get it right? Did they not get it right? And I think most times we say, yeah, this kind of makes sense. But when I just think when you have a sore thumb matchup, if you will, like La Center versus Seton Catholic round 2, that you're like, does that make sense when it's supposed to be a state tournament and you end up playing your league rival?
That's fair. I get it, 100% fair. It reminds me back in 2012, I want to say, if I get that right, back when Max Brown was quarterbacking Skyview and Lakes, that was a first round opponent, and that was, I believe, a one-loss Lakes team going against an undefeated Skyline team. And again, that's when the brackets were predetermined slots, and everyone cried out of this should be no less than a state championship matchup, and that ultimately turned into a first round matchup. And that was really the starting focal point of transitioning away from the predetermined slots going in ahead of time into the season into the format of what we now have. And so I think the format that we do have with the human element is a good one, but it's okay to make tweaks here and there, and I think maybe that is that next step with the tweaks. The only thing about the two-way bracket I was surprised with, and a number of folks on Twitter was in agreement with it. It was Olympic out of Bremerton getting a 16 seed, very similar to Washougal, was a league champion out of the Olympic League in 2A, had a 9-game winning streak, I think, at one point, and got the 16 seed. But again, that's, I think, a knock on West Sound football as it is, ever since the days of South Kitsap really kind of falling off, having that dominance in football. We really haven't seen West Sound football rise to the level of the former South Kitsap team. So again, it's not perfect by any means, but I think for the majority of this year's brackets, I think the committee did get the matchups right. Yeah,
I think they do on a broad sense, more or less get it right. I understand the point of view from Olympic. It's like, hey, we had this great season, and congratulations for your troubles. You get to face Archbishop Murphy.
Yes.
So, yeah, and I think it's just one of those things where it's part of the fun of this time of season. It's like you could have the most infallible system, we're still going to find things to talk about and question.
Do you know how many people still, 15 years later, still complain about the non-double elimination 16-team basketball format? Mm-hmm. Again, it has been so long. I can't remember when that went into play. I think 2009 is when that happened, but there are still people wanting to go back to that formula, something that, let's face it is not coming back anytime soon.
No, but anyway, and then there was one. We only have Seton Catholic advancing to the state quarterfinals. They're going to face Royal, which for the third straight time is the Cougars going against one of the most dynastic small school football programs in the state, possibly in state history. So we'll be interested to see what happens there. But the sense I got from being at Seton's victory over Le Center was like, hey, we're handling what we can control. We're going to give them our best shot. And for the third year in a row, we're playing later than any other program, or as late or later than any other program in Southwest Washington. So that's what the Cougars are kind of approaching this week as.
And as they should. So Congratulations to Seton Catholic getting to the state quarterfinals. It's something that is a privilege to play at this point in the season, right? I mean, you're only guaranteed, unless you have a last-minute cancellation or a forfeit by your opponent, everyone is guaranteed 9 games. So anything beyond 9 weeks of the high school football regular season is a privilege to be at this point. So facing mighty Royal for the third straight year, there should be a level of confidence and swagger for Seton Catholic. Even though they're being looked at as the underdog, they have been looked at as the underdog the previous 2 matchups. The first one 2 years ago was at Royal in the state semifinals, and last year even at Husky Stadium playing for the state championship, going as an underdog. But you got to remember, going back to that championship game, it was a 21-21 game at halftime last year. Seton Catholic forcing a couple of back-to-back turnovers on defense by Royal, and one of them in the red zone especially, giving Seton Catholic a lot of momentum and a lot of vibe going into that locker room. And you got to have that mentality going into an opponent as mighty as Royal as well, because why not, right? You have nothing to lose.
Yeah, house money at this point.
Absolutely. So I think not turning the ball over is going to be the big factor, and not getting down early is something else, because it is tough at this point of the season to play catch-up football. And so that's something that they haven't had to do much this year. The game against Columbia River, I think if they win an extra quarter, they might have beaten Columbia River the way that they had come back in the second half in week 1. But it is a daunting task, but something that the Cougars are familiar with just because of how they've played against them the last 2 years.
Well, congratulations to all the football teams on all their seasons, especially the ones that made the postseason. There's some years like last year when we're booking trips up to Seattle for 2 state championship games in Husky Stadium. And then there's others where we, it's not football that really takes the spotlight this time of year. We've got soccer and volleyball, and this is going to be a really exciting week, I think, especially on the soccer front, because we have in the 2A Final Four Hawkinson and Columbia River. Again, I talked to Philly Affinigus, the River coach, after their quarterfinal win over East Valley of Yakima on Saturday, and I actually broke the news to him that Hawkinson had gone up to Bellingham and upset number 3 seed Seaholm to earn a Final Four berth. He's like, oh, it's the 2A Greater St. Helens League doing it again. I think people are kind of getting sick of us doing that, but that's just the way we play down here.
Well, yeah, and it shows really the strength of especially girls soccer in the league, right? A couple years ago when Hawkinson was the 16 seed going up to number 1 Fife and knocking Fife off. And I mean, let's face it, until the 2A Greater St. Helens League doesn't win a league title, there is no reason why they shouldn't be top 4 seeds. Right. In my opinion.
Or you talk about state title.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, Columbia River, 9th consecutive state. I mean, that is a heck of a run right there. And you mentioned the 2A, 1A Skyview, first time since 2010, going back to the Final Four as well. They've got a good opponent in Tahoma, a team they just played a week and a half ago, losing 1-0. And so I think that's going to be a really intriguing matchup to see if they can have a win to get guaranteed highest finish ever in program history. So it's going to be a good weekend for girls soccer.
Well, and then Seton Catholic in the 1As, they look as dangerous as any team in the small school. They kind of been rolling through, up until this quarterfinal matchup where they showed they can win a 1-0 game, which they did against University Prep. But yeah, Skyview, I've seen them a couple times this year. They play excellent defense. One of the games I saw them was against a Puyallup team that has one of the best forwards in the state, and that they were able to grind out a 1-0 win against them. So who's to say Skyview can't get it done in Puyallup? And then I think River has to be the favorite going into the Final Four in 2A. This is a Rapids team that made it to the state championship game only to lose to Ridgefield. Again, not the latest, or it's becoming almost a common theme in the last 10 years that 2A Greater St. Helens League teams kind of run it back, only this time for a state title. So I'm very excited to see what comes out of soccer. But then I'll be actually in Yakima for 3A, 4A volleyball, where Camas and Prairie, I think both have a very good chance to leave there with a trophy, just like Columbia River and La Center did this past weekend when you were there.
Yeah, first time I've done state volleyball since, I want to say when the tournament was back in Lacey at St. Martin's University. Yeah, Columbia River, the Reign is the 4-time state champions in 2A, something that no prior 2A team had ever done. That was a WIAA record, so losing to Ellensburg in the semifinals. But I was really impressed with just how well they rebounded in that match, right? It can go one of two ways. You can either just completely fall flat and end up just accepting fourth place in that fourth place match, or going out and having a little bit of fun and coming away with a win to end your high school season. And I think the way that Columbia River did it was brilliant by their coaches. They, in between the semifinal loss and the fourth place match, there's about a 3-hour gap in between match time. And so head coach Breanne Smedley and her staff went to a local dollar store to get a bunch of just fun items, tiaras, masquerade ball masks, something to just really lighten the mood and the spirits of the team. And you could really see that on the court. A couple of kids were actually wearing those little goofy masks and tiaras during warm-ups. And so kudos to River. It was an exceptional, tremendous run. If you include Ridgefield, Southwest Washington has won the past 6 state titles going back to 2018 and 19 with Ridgefield. So, and La Center as well, coming home with their 4th consecutive state trophy, reaching the state semis for the 3rd straight year in 1A. So they just ran up into a buzzsaw in Meridian, a much bigger team at the net as well. But it was definitely a good year for the small schools coming home with trophies.
Yeah, I think we've gotten used to that in the past year, past years, seeing just that success, whether it be at La Center or Columbia River or Ridgefield, always makes that small school volleyball tournament fun. And we'll just leave on, looking ahead to the 4A, 3A tournament. I think Camas, even though they're a 5 seed, really, I think they're a little bit better than that. They just happen to run into number 1 seed Curtis in the bi-district championship game, a Curtis team that they've lost to twice this year and would face in the semifinals again. So would third time the charm be the case for Camas if they reach that point with a dynamic player on the outside like Ella Thompson and some great skill players like Emma Sanchez and some size at the line? I wouldn't put it past them, but them and Prairie, who enters the state tournament with just 1 loss, I think it's just a matter of putting their best game forward to go into a tournament where every team is good, and to come out with a trophy, I think would be a big success. But I think honestly, both teams are looking at, we want to make it to the semifinals. That's kind of, and then let the chips fall where they may at that point. But I think both of them are looking to get to the Final Four.
Upsets happen, and seeding sometimes gets thrown out the window. Look at Wenatchee, what they did in the 4A tournament last year. That completely came out of nowhere. I don't think anyone expected Wenatchee to win its first volleyball title in school history. So you know what? It's this is the best time to play your best volleyball at the state tournament. All
right. Well, best luck to all the teams competing this weekend. It's where memories are made. We'll be following along from wherever we are, and you should follow us along too at 360 Preps, and we will see you next time.